This is my farm.
Don't come out here and tell me what I need.
I need solutions that work and market options that are worth my time.
Small town support that sees the bigger picture.
A global network that empowers us. A co-op that's there for us every day.
Thank you for joining us on Agri-Pulse.com for this week's Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined this week by Agri-Pulse Executive Editor Phil Brasher, as well as Representative Rick Crawford from the state of Arkansas. And Congressman Crawford, we certainly appreciate you joining us for a pretty wide-ranging conversation here as we look at a lot of different issues. And one of those issues is how Capitol Hill and Congress and really the United States government more broadly plans to react to the coronavirus and all of the various issues that it's causing in a lot of different sectors of the economy, including agriculture. And one of the things that we saw the House do was pass the HEROES Act, and that did include some additional funding for agriculture and for the CCC. But I'm wondering, as we look toward, obviously the Senate is not just going to take up the HEROES Act chapter and verse, but as we look toward potential coronavirus funding later on down the road, what do you think is going to be the need of American agriculture, and what do you think is going to need to be in that legislation?
Well, we continue to see historic declines in farm income. I mean, it's been almost my entire time in Congress, we've seen a steady decline in farm income. And there are a lot of issues. And, of course, funding obviously plays a role in that. Things like MFP. Are we going to see another round of MFP? Was CFAP sufficient in regards to, the coronavirus pandemic? Will there be another round? I'm not sure, because we really kind of got to let these things percolate and start to do an evaluation on whether they're having any effect or not, whether it's a positive effect or do we need more. I just don't think that the data is out there right now to support either argument to not do it or to do it. So we've got to wait a little longer, I think. And we probably won't. Honestly, I'm not sure we're going to know, or as far as ag is concerned, I'm not sure we're going to know until we get down closer to harvest time. And then we'll have to work fast. So I think it's probably worth us considering a contingency plan based on economic conditions at a point in the future. But at this point, I think it would be purely speculation. And so I think probably better to keep our powder dry, being prepared to do something if the need arises. But, in amongst all these other issues, one of the underlying issues as much as anything are, trade deals. I mean, how do we expand market access? We can't count on China to be, good faith actors in regard to the phase one trade deal that we were anxious to see take place. And so I think we're going to have to look at how do we get involved in these bilateral trade deals in the Pacific Rim, using those countries like Vietnam. Vietnam's economy has done remarkably well. In fact, they did a great job on locking down coronavirus, and their numbers are really good. Vietnam is a potential opportunity for us to be almost a distributor in the Pacific Rim with regard to our agricultural products and other products that we need to access the Chinese market. Yes, we'll take a little bit of a hit price-wise on that, but it would be much preferred to tariffs implemented by the Chinese or being blocked out for political reasons. The facts remain that the Chinese market is demand inelastic. They've got to have a certain amount of soybeans, a certain amount of corn. They just have to, and they can't provide that on their own. So they're going to be looking to other markets. I think to the extent that we can cooperate with countries like Brazil and Argentina, understanding, the different dynamics of their production cycle and ours, and how we can sort of work together to make sure that we have access to the market, even if it comes through an intermediary. That's probably not a bad plan. And the alternative, recognizing that U.S. soybeans will find their way into China. It just has to happen. It's a question of how they get
there. So Congressman, it sounds like you think the Senate is talking about taking up another coronavirus bill in July. It sounds like you may think that's a little premature. You're talking about harvest.
I mean, it's probably a little bit. We're not even halfway through the season right now. I mean, we've got guys right now, for example, in cotton that are just finishing up cotton planting, and so we don't. It's hard to anticipate. You look at the cotton market as an example. It's tough. I mean, almost certainly there's going to be a need for some assistance in cotton. But again, are we going to just do an across the board relief measure? Are we going to make it crop specific? What levels? All those kinds of things. That's going to have to be evaluated. I'm not sure that you just want to just do a blanket kind of program and say, here it is, based on data right now, when we really don't know what crop conditions are. We kind of have an idea what the market conditions would be at harvest. I don't see a whole lot of upside right now in this cotton market, but other commodities might look a little bit better. And so you're going to have to look at, are there levels of help that we can offer in certain commodities, being more commodity specific, and say, yes, we'll do this much for cotton, we'll do this much for soybeans, and sort of make it a little more market based, a little more reflective of what the conditions are and we don't really know right now what those needs will be. So I think tee something up ready to go, but I think it would be to say definitively we're going to give this much money without knowing. I mean, we have limited resources. We've already added another $2 trillion to our national debt. Let's try to show some restraint and make this a little more targeted. That's all I'm saying. I'm not denying the fact that producers are going to need some help. No question about that. And I think it's in our interest as a country to make sure that we're invested in ag production because it's a national security imperative. We have to do it. But I think maybe we can do it a little more targeted, a little more crop specific, and get more out of our money than just, issuing a blanket, funding measure that doesn't necessarily address specifics of each. And that includes produce crops as well. I mean, they've struggled, and it's not just about the program crops. It's our livestock producers, our horticulture crops, those kinds of things. We need to be looking across the board at how we can target relief to those producers that we rely on.
FAPRI came out with the new Food and Agriculture Policy Research Institute came out with the new forecast, updated forecast this week. And they estimated that net cash farm income would drop about 15% this year, even with the $16 billion in CFAP payments that are going out. Mm-hmm. Then they're projecting another 7% drop from that in 2021. Does Congress need to make that up? And can farmers count on additional ad hoc payments in 2021 and beyond?
I'm kind of at a loss to speculate what Congress can do right now. I mean, we're not doing a heck of a lot. We were offline. We were talking about this. We should be in session right now. We should be addressing these issues, and we're not. We've got an awful lot of things that have sort of sucked all the oxygen out of the room, so to speak, that are pressing issues. But our ability to feed and clothe ourselves is also always going to be a pressing issue. And the folks that we rely on to do that, if and when they need help, we need to be prepared to offer that help. And right now, we're not. We're basically sitting back and saying, "Okay, FAPRI, give us your numbers," and we're not doing an evaluation. We're not studying that. We're not having hearings. We're not bringing FAPRI into the Ag Committee and saying, tell us what we can expect in the balance of this year and up in 2021. Yeah, I mean, so we're all kind of at a loss for what we can do. And would there be? And I think there were some eye-opening things that took place that we can attribute to the pandemic that maybe got some people's attention, got the American consumer's attention with regard to our food chain integrity that may help us actually to move some legislation to assist farmers. So if there's a silver lining in this, it's probably that the coronavirus raised the level of awareness on these issues and might make it easier to move legislation to help farmers. That said, we're not doing anything right now. And that's frustrating to members like me and others that really want to be engaged in trying to help the American people.
Does the Farm Bill need to be reopened or do a new Farm Bill earlier than 2023? Given
I almost think I keep hearing that from people. I don't necessarily like reopening a Farm Bill. If we're going to do that, I would be inclined to say let's just do a new Farm Bill. It really kind of goes to the state of flux that the farm economy is in, and not just the farm economy, but the general economy and how that impacts ag producers. And we do our best in a moment in time to try and, put a farm bill together over a period of 5 years. And over that period of 5 years, a lot can happen. A lot of changes can take place that we have no way of knowing or anticipating. So I guess one of the questions we might want to ask as well is that, do we need to rely on a 5-year reauthorization, or should we start looking at a shorter span of time that is more of an accurate reflection of market conditions and global market access and things like this that are going to have an impact on farm income and our producers' ability to sustain their efforts? So maybe that's the conversation we need to have, instead of falling back on, look, farm bills are hard, and that's why you probably don't want to mess with them, but more than once every 5 years. However, as I said before, I think we've seen now a light shown on the importance of food chain integrity and the role it plays in our security. And so maybe we do need to think about reauthorizing more frequently so that our policy reflects a more real-time perspective.
So, Congressman, before we let you go here today, we want to talk about one of the issues that's been kind of dominating the ag policy landscape here, especially in the last week, and that is kind of this court fight between a number of petitioners as well as the Environmental Protection Agency over the future of the use of dicamba. And I know you come from a major rice district, but other commodities grown in your district and in kind of your neck of the woods as well. I'm wondering, as we watch kind of the courts and the administration have this back and forth, I'm wondering, what is, if any, the role of Congress in a situation like this?
Well, I would say, first off, I hope that we don't get into a liberal versus conservative. This cuts across. This is not a political, ideological fight as much as it is about, look, in my district in Arkansas, it's about a 50-50 proposition. And I can tell you that just a few years back, a guy that I had known for a long time, he was murdered over this issue. And so the question I have is, I'm not trying to question the court's decision. I'm not trying to question the EPA, either one. But what we have seen over the years is we saw, for example, glyphosate tolerance rise to a level and there was no new chemistry coming to the marketplace. Maybe it's time we re-examine how we regulate new products in the ag space. For example, the regulatory cost, the time it takes to introduce a new product on the market kind of makes companies go, well, they rode that horse right into the ground, glyphosate. And I'm not casting aspersions on any motivations of any company. That's not what I'm saying. But because it's so expensive to introduce new technology, I think they didn't anticipate that this was potential fallout that would accompany bringing in an old product like dicamba and sort of repackaging that. It was actually easier and more cost effective to introduce and engineer a new bean, a new cottonseed, than it was to come up with new technology to address evolving tolerance issues. And in the process, what happened is, I don't think they anticipated what that would mean, even for farmers that weren't using spraying dicamba in season. They were having to purchase the seed anyway, just from a defensive posture. And so what was happening is that you have some folks that are absolutely committed to dicamba and others that absolutely hated it. And it created just a split, and it kind of pitted farmer against farmer. And anytime you do that, I just don't think that's a healthy dynamic in the marketplace. That said, I'm not going to question the EPA's decision or the court's decision or the people who were involved in the lawsuit, but I think it's, you kind of got to reevaluate. Can we continue to operate in this regulatory regime and do a good job in introducing new technology, which we have to rely on? It's essential that we be able to maintain a high degree of proficiency in our ag production because we have to feed so many people. We're going to have to rely on technology. And to constrain that from a regulatory standpoint leads to issues like this. And so whichever side of this issue you personally come down on, everybody has an opinion on it. But I think the root cause is the excessive cost and regulatory regime that exists that prevents companies from bringing new technology on a regular basis because it's so costly.
So, as a legislator, what does that look like? Is it appropriations riders? Is it reopening FIFRA? I mean, what is the practical next steps in your mind?
I think it's all of the above. When you start talking about appropriations, you're talking about short-term solutions. You know, it's things that are tied to funding. When you're talking about reopening FIFRA, now you're talking about statutory solutions that change the landscape, the regulatory landscape, to a significant degree, that they can operate a little more efficiently. We're seeing that take place right now as a coronavirus response, because we had to move quickly. Well, why can't we do that in the ag space? Same deal. I mean, you can take a company that can get something in the market by going to South Africa, for example, a product that they can go and do testing on in South Africa and get that on the market in a matter of a year, where it might take 5+ to get it on the market here in the United States. And so what happens is we see other countries that get a competitive advantage on certain products because the regulatory regime is considerably less constrictive than ours. That puts us behind the 8 ball from a competitive standpoint, but it also creates issues like we're dealing with now with regard to dicamba. And so it's a combination. Yeah, I think you can affect some short-term solutions through the appropriations process, but that's never long-term. You're not changing the statute per se. You almost have to go into some of these like FIFRA, like you suggested, and re-examine how strict that regulatory regime is, and how do we streamline the process. This administration is all about streamlining with regard to regulatory issues, and we've seen it in other areas. But we really need to look at that in ag, and so we can speed up that process and start to deliver results more quickly.
So obviously a wide range of subjects before American Agriculture and before the House Ag Committee today, and we certainly appreciate Congressman Crawford, you taking a little bit of time to join us and discuss those here today.
You bet. Glad to be with you.
For Congressman Crawford and for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.